take my pain, numb my heart, and ease my brain. Oh, whiskey, don't you...
Why think alone when you can drink it all in with Ricochet's 3 Whiskey Happy Hour? Join your bartenders, Steve Hayward, John Yu, and the international woman of mystery, Lucretia.
Well, this life that I've been living ain't too easy on the soul. Sometimes you gotta give in and let that whiskey flow.
Welcome, everyone, to the 2 Million Miler episode of the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour. And the reason we called that is because one of our co-hosts, I will let you guess which one, recently hit the 2 million mile frequent flyer, I don't know what you call it, achievement with United Airlines, which means that our own Steve Hayward both flies around too much, talks too much, and is a glutton for punishment on United Airlines.
Well, that's certainly true.
Steve, how are you?
Well,
what did they give
friendly
you?
skies.
Well, I don't know if it's an achievement or not. Someone said, congratulations. And I said, I'm not sure. It might mean condolences because it doesn't mean you've been on airplanes too much. But I was a little surprised. I thought maybe they gave me this really fancy pen and they gave me a medallion. And then when I got off the plane, they gave me this, listeners can't, I'll crackle it for listeners to hear like Rush Limbaugh used to do, but they gave me the official printout of the flight plan signed by the entire crew with little messages from the captain and the co-pilot and the first officer and everything. So I guess they do this for people who make multiple millions of miles. And the captain said, Captain came down the aisle before we took off to greet me and shake my hand and said, is there anything I can do for you? And I said, well, sure. You could get me global services status. Right. I mean, and that's a mysterious thing, right, John? Are you global services, John?
No, never been. No.
Yeah, well, it's not something you apply for. You get a mysterious invitation in the mail to join it, and it's nobody's been able to reverse engineer it very clearly the way people do law school.
Steve, you should have asked to land the plane, you idiot.
No,
if anyone would have let you do that, that's easier than getting global services. I'll tell you that much.
I think that's probably true. Anyway.
And Lucretia, how are you? Are you going to be Steve's free guest ticket that he's no doubt gets every time he flies now?
No comment on that one. I'm just fine. Thank you, John. I have to tell you that this global warming climate change stuff. It's the end of September, which is usually the lovely time of the year, at least where I live. Everything's still green and fully blossomed. And we have had nothing but rain for the last 10 days. And I am sitting in my house with the light on because even though it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon here, it is almost completely dark because it's such a horrible storm. So if I disappear, guys, you'll know why.
Well,
happen to me during Zoom.
We got some of that our way. Did the rain and thunderstorms?
Yeah, some kind of hurricane system.
Yeah, it was cool. It was. I saw lightning, but I heard no thunder and there was no rain.
Well, I blame global warming. I blame Trump.
Yeah. Well,
actually, I don't mind the rain at all, but
yeah, no, we had a ferocious thunder and lightning storm that lasted hours on my Central Coast location, and that happens about once every 10 years. It's very rare and very humid weather. And now I'm here. I'm in DC
because you guys don't drive electric cars.
Yes. Steve, you're saying you're here in DC, but
yeah, just for a day for a quick event. But it's hot and humid here. When usually late September is pretty pleasant. And it's still kind of gross. So, okay.
Well, let's kick off the show with a DC story then, which is the news that has embroiled Washington, D.C. The Trump Justice Department has indicted Jim Comey, the former director of the FBI, just a few days before the statute of limitations run, which means the time in which, after the commission of the alleged crime, that the government has basically 5 years to bring charges. And the charges are for lying to Congress. Specifically, under questioning from Senator Ted Cruz, did Comey lie when he said he did not authorize people at the FBI to leak law enforcement information to the press? And the actual thing he wanted leaked was that the FBI was vigorously pursuing its investigation into Hillary Clinton's classified emails back in the 2020 elections. So, Steve, why don't you start us off since you're actually there? The reports sound like all of DC has been thrown into chaos by the news of this prosecution, with Democrats saying that this is Trump's abuse of the legal system to go after his enemies and opponents. And Trump supporters, no doubt happy that one of the major figures who started the whole Mueller investigation is being brought to justice. Steve, what's your view? What's your impression in DC, since you're hanging around with all those swamp figures and fitting in very nicely with your 2 million mile status?
John, first of all, I don't think Washington's in a tizzy over this. You have to stop watching MSNBC and writing slop for the Washington Post. I don't know. I think it's just a distraction ahead of what's really coming, which is going to be the budget showdown, I think, on Monday. But a couple things, and we talked about it already separately on the Ricochet podcast. I know we have some crossover listeners. I'm still mad about the Scooter Libby prosecution 20 years ago. And remember, in that case, you had a special counsel investigating who leaked Valerie Plame's name to Robert Novak. And Novak wouldn't tell because he's a reporter. Turns out they knew that it was Richard Armitage, but he's a full-fledged member in good standing of the swamp. So they decided not to prosecute him for leaking. I don't know. I forget the reason why, but they continued the tertiary investigation to get somebody, because Fitzgerald seemed to believe, the special counsel, Pat Fitzgerald, that somebody has to be charged with a crime. And so they decided to charge Libby, with the crime of lying to the FBI. And was that really a deliberate lie, or is his memory faulty? But it was a really picayune prosecution, I think. And even the DC jury at the end of it, when he was sentenced, said, well, wait a minute, we thought, they made a case that he'd actually committed the technical violation of lying to the FBI, but we didn't think he deserved any jail time. Even a DC jury thought this was a bit of a reach. Okay.
But then, of course, the spineless, slimy George W. Bush, when he had the opportunity to pardon him, just commuted his sentence,
Right.
like the scumbag that he is.
Well, I'm not sure I go quite.
What?
I thought that was weak of him too. And then Trump came along.
Too.
And, yeah, and I don't know Scooter Libby very well, but we belonged, when I lived back here, in the same swim club. He's just the nicest guy in the world. You must know him some, John, I think. Maybe not.
A little bit.
He's the nicest guy in the world, and what a huge injustice it was. So I have a bad attitude about this, and I also mentioned earlier that, look, this is not unprecedented. Perjury was the charge brought against Alger Hiss, and that took 2 trials to convict him of perjury. And by the way, people who say there's no politics involved in these things, I mean, I don't know what naive people these are, but
Who?
But a little detail about the Hiss case was there were a lot of people in the Truman Justice Department who wanted to bring a grand jury indictment against Chambers for perjury. And this was, the Hiss forces saying, wait a minute, I'm not the perjurer. That other guy's the perjurer. Yeah. And that only unraveled after we had the pumpkin papers and all the rest of that story, which is so fun. But the point is that
Thank you, analogy man.
There. Yeah. Oh, well, I thought you might like that. I would think, Lucretia, you'd be delighted at this indictment.
I am delighted. I'm absolutely delighted.
You and Hillary Clinton.
And the reason that I'm delighted is because the left figured out a long time ago that you can beat the rat, but you can't beat the ride, and they want to make sure that they wanted to make sure for, say, Michael Flynn and even Trump and many, many others, that the ride would be the worst thing. And for someone like Trump, who's really, really wealthy, it was still an incredible distraction and all those other things, but he was okay. The rest of the people, like the January 6th protesters, 247 FBI agents or informants on the ground on January 6th. John, I hope you saw that today. Remember, I told you a long time.
No, I didn't see that.
Of course not. They don't post it in the Washington Post. They don't report it. Or
where did they post? Which one of your weird
actually
conspiracy theory sites was this on?
No.
The FBI
The New York
actually admitted
Times.
to it.
Yeah, the
The FBI admitted to it. Anyway, so I don't know. The press is trying very hard to make it seem as if there isn't enough evidence, and the grand jury wasn't unanimous in this, and that the Eric, whatever his name is, guy, he didn't prosecute because he didn't see enough evidence. But of course, the truth of the matter is that they just don't come any worse than Comey, and I'm hoping that he gets not only bankrupted but gets the 5-year jail term that he deserves. I believe, if I'm correct, that guy Eric, what is his name? I can't be bothered to remember, but he was trying to hold out until the statute of limitations runs out next week on the 30th. So it's just a scummy, just everything about this political elite classes just drives me crazy. So I'm glad. I hope he goes down. I hope he takes Hillary Clinton with him. I hope he takes Strzok and Lisa Page and McCabe and all of those other traitors to
They could
the.
probably get a group rate, club fed.
Wouldn't that be awesome? But you remember that the judge that got assigned the case is some Biden appointee or Obama appointee in a really sketchy venue to begin with. They should move for a change, but they won't get it. But still, anyway, that's all I have to say about Comey. Hope he goes down hard.
But it's I mean, a lot of, to me, and I was talking about this on TV today. This reminds me of the kinds of prosecutions that used to be brought against mob leaders. You know, they couldn't get the mob leader for all the bad things he did, so they prosecuted Al Capone for tax evasion.
Yep.
And here, what Comey's really guilty of is turning using the FBI in this political way to investigate. I mean, first I botched the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Then he tried to entrap Trump into obstruction of justice and really set off the whole Mueller investigation. But the actual crime is just this one sentence he allegedly lied, in which he allegedly lied to Congress about whether he told McCabe to leak to the press or not to leak to the press. McCabe, interestingly, under oath, has said that he was told to leak to the press. And now Comey is saying, no, I didn't tell him to do that. Do you have any
question
worries about the fact that this, the charge is actually on this, pretty small scale example of he said, she said about testimony to Congress?
No, because
Steve?
here's why I don't.
Patricia?
Can I answer that? Because I want to
Yeah,
ask
go
a
for it.
question in that, and then I'll defer to Steve. My first question is, I thought that there was more to it than simply what he encouraged McCabe to do. Comey himself admitted to giving those classified documents to his friend Richard somebody or other who's some
That's
sort
a
of
different thing for which I thought he should have been prosecuted, but
I
the
thought that was
statute of
one of the
limitations
charges that
has,
they indicted him for.
no, not yet.
Oh,
I mean, maybe they could change it, but
oh, I thought I read it in the indictment. Maybe I was wrong.
uh,
I get
I read the
confused.
indictment. I think it's only about the statement. Now they could always add to it later, but those events might have been from too long ago. And also, I might add that he was the Inspector General of the Justice Department when they did the investigation referred uh, Comey for prosecution, but then the Justice Department didn't charge him.
Of
But I
course
don't
not.
think the thing that I think that, one of the terrible things Comey did was, as you say, he wrote these memos that were classified about his conversations with Trump about prosecutions. And then he had his friend leak it to the New York Times. But that's not what this one is. This one is just
Oh, okay.
this
You're the
questioning
lawyer.
by Ted Cruz. Well, it's only one paragraph long, the indictment, basically. Yeah.
Okay, one more comment that before I turn it over to Steve. Did either of you ever read the Bonfire of the Vanities?
Oh, yeah. Back in
Or
the
I guess
80s.
maybe saw the
Yeah.
movie. Pardon?
Terrible
So
movie.
there was a movie. It starred Tom Hanks
Tom Hanks, yeah.
and
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, yeah.
I don't remember if this came as clear in the movie, but in the book, one of the things that happens to the Tom Hanks character in the book, I forget his name, is that he goes from being this elite titan, his suits cost $7,000 back in the day, to being perp walked, to being treated just like, just the average scum of the earth kind of dirtbag next door. And he starts wearing polyester clothes when he shows up in court. And there's just all this lovely Tom Wolfe kind of under commentary about how he's taken down from his high place. And if nothing else, if Comey actually gets prosecuted on that, even that one charge, and is actually found guilty, which I think he has to be, not the best jury or judge, but okay. Then at least it'll take him down from his lofty, sort of elite, snobbish uh, place in society to being just your average criminal. That's what I'm hoping. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Well,
Steve,
well,
is Jim Comey going to be the next hero of the next Tom Wolfe novel?
well, first of all, Tom Wolfe has departed this vale of tears.
Yes.
Second, just a quick a quick announcement, sort of. My live stream attempt, which I have to do through Google, is not working right. It's only presenting my screen, although I think you can hear everything going on. We actually have 2 viewers, but I think
Hi, viewers.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm going to end the live stream.
I think they clicked on the wrong link and are expecting to see some Jim Comey live testimony or something.
I don't know. Well, maybe I'll leave it up if people want.
Nice going, Steve.
The
Doesn't
chat
hurt
window's
anything.
not working either, so we're trying. We're going to get this right eventually. But all right, I'll leave
And
it
if
going.
when Steve hits 4 million miles, he'll screw the audio up too.
I'll leave it up for our 2 viewers who have subscribed to the YouTube channel, and we'll get this figured out. But they got to stare at me for the whole hour.
It's a start, Steve.
Okay,
Better than the
right.
last time.
Progress.
So,
Yeah,
Steve,
okay.
the question is: does the like this lightness of the charges worry you against Comey? I mean, don't conservatives not like, the government, going after people who are public enemy number one, but then charging them with small scale things just to get them?
No, it really doesn't bother me at all. And here's why. I do think this sends out a sign that we're now having zero tolerance toward career people and senior bureaucrats and people who think they can take it upon themselves to be to sanction things like the Russia hoax and all the rest of that. I think it's a good shot across the bow that our civil servants need to behave themselves properly. And I think Comey played a very devious game. And maybe he was sloppy too. I don't know. But the point is, there should be consequences for some of the stuff that he set in motion or didn't stop. Up until that first Hillary Clinton press conference, I had formed a favorable opinion of him as FBI director. But when he shrunk from charging her, I thought, he's becoming a political FBI director. And maybe they all have been, except, I think Hoover had somewhat more in his favor for the way he conducted his office. But
Hoover was at least bipartisan in his political approach to everything.
And anti-communist.
And
anti-communist,
that's really the good
yeah.
part, right? That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was why
So
it was
I'm-
bipartisan when the presidents from either party were still anti-communist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an unfair way to look at it for
I mean,
Hoover.
my guess is, John, is I think future FBI directors are going to be more careful about how they touch these things that have large political consequences and factors involved.
Yeah, just to close the loop on it, I think Comey was one of the worst FBI directors we ever had, and he really politicized the agency, not Democrat, Republican, but got the FBI really embroiled with presidential politics. And it's something you also said, Steve. He was a senior government official who, I think, similar to the mindset of some of them, we could think of Dr. Fauci in this vein too, another favorite of Lucretia's, is that they think they knew better. No, they know better so much that they ignore the Constitution and the laws and just all the rules that exist to keep the government's power in check. So think about what Comey did. Remember, right up until the 2016 election, he publicly announced that Hillary Clinton was not guilty of any federal crimes, but then proceeded to describe and criticize what she had done, when the traditional rule is if you don't charge someone, then you don't say anything, one way or the other. I mean, just Comey thought he should decide what the American public should know or not know, and his view on it before just a few weeks before the election. And then he thought President Trump was unfit to be president, so he tried to get a special counsel appointed, and which he succeeded at, in order to bring down his presidency. So this is the kind of attitude I think I agree with you, Steve. We should root out from senior officials in the government. Lucretia has a special feature. Do you want to use it now?
I was going to do it
or
at
do you
the
want
end,
it at
but
the end of the show?
I can do it
Okay.
now. I can do it now.
It has a special feature which she calls the Darwin effect of the week.
I do, because, okay, so everybody heard that Trump came out, and it's absolutely crazy. Trump came out and said that they are recommending and passing the guidance along to medical doctors across the country that pregnant women not take Tylenol, which was the only only supposed safe painkiller that you're supposed to take when you're pregnant. Now, okay, sorry, a little bit of a sideshow here. Lucretia's youngest, when she was pregnant with her youngest, I had every opportunistic infection known to man because of a condition. I had an elbow infection. I mean, it was ridiculous.
I didn't know your elbow could get affected. Wow, it's just a bone.
Yeah, no.
I guess when you
it's
sharpen it the way Lucretia has and
Yeah,
then
there's
plunge it
that.
into the
Anyway,
sides of liberals,
but
it's
I never took
bound to get
Tylenol.
infected.
You know why I don't take Tylenol? This is my favorite ex post ever. One thing I like about Tylenol is how if you have a bad headache and you take it, nothing happens. anyway, so maybe there's association, a correlation. They haven't proved causation, but those kinds of things in the medical world are rarely ever proven to the point of causation. Recommendation: don't take Tylenol unless it's really, really necessary. You've got 104 fever, blah 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 blah. Because it was Trump who said it. You have all of these stupid pregnant women out there, lefty liberal pregnant women, just downing huge handfuls of Tylenol.
Are they
And
really? No.
Yeah.
Oh,
Really?
yes. And here's the crazy
Oh,
thing.
bro.
Tylenol there are more overdoses as a result of overdosing on Tylenol. That was until recently than there were from oxycodone. I'm guessing that's probably not true anymore
Really?
since the real.
Wow.
But Tylenol is a very dangerous. It is anything but safe and effective. One of my personal favorites was a commentator who said, I don't take Tylenol. If I want to destroy my liver, I'm going to do it with alcohol, like any real man will. So my Darwin effect of the week is all of those stupid liberal leftist pregnant women downing entire bottles of Tylenol in their Trump derangement syndrome, because it is actually fatal. It just
I am
takes a little
sorry
while.
that I did not realize that this should come at the end of the show, but this is a great segue, and it gives Steve and I time to think of our own Darwin nominees by the end of the show. But it's also a great segue to our next topic, which is the budget shutdown. Because if the Congress and the president don't agree, then the Medicare Medicaid systems won't be able to buy up all that Tylenol and distribute it and give it to everybody. But
There
we
you
have
go.
a
That's good.
looming budget shutdown that apparently will occur this upcoming week unless the Congress and the president can agree on spending. And apparently, the House has already passed a short-term spending bill, but apparently Democrats in the Senate are refusing to go along unless the Congress restores the cuts from just the big, beautiful bill on various Obamacare subsidies for health insurance. Steve, once again, you are in the swamp where, again, the city is thrown into chaos at the idea that the federal government might actually shut down again. Steve, what do you think will happen? Do you think that Republicans will stick to their guns, say we're not reversing the spending cuts we just passed a few months ago and let the government shut down? Or will people cave and cave into the Democrats' demands in order to get a budget passed?
Well, they better hold firm because, for one thing, Republicans, for a change, hold all of the high cards here. That hasn't really ever been true. Republicans usually get blamed for budget shutdowns, depending, even when they've run Congress.
Won't they get blamed this time since the House, Senate, and the presidency are all under the control of
The
Well,
big,
not
beautiful
really.
bill.
Well, I think, no, I mean, here's what I think should happen. Well, first of all, I think we're also seeing something new here, and that is Trump, as always, on the offense, saying, well, you know what, if we're going to furlough non-essential employees, why do we have to have them back? Back in the 90s, I think it was one of the Clinton budget shutdowns, and Phil Gramm said at the time, I thought the only mistake was opening the government back up again. Well, you know what? That may actually become the party position this time. And I think this threat it's terrifying some Democrats, especially, the two Virginia Democrats, Warner and the guy who ran with Hillary, Tim Kaine.
Tim Kaine.
It's amazing that you don't even remember this guy. Who was,
I mean, that's where Tim Walz is headed, into Tim Kaine land.
exactly.
Not going to be, remember, he was vice president candidate in a
Right.
year.
But here's the
Or
point.
even
I mean,
now.
I think this fits in with the, this comes, by the way, and we should probably leave this for another time. It comes at the same time the Supreme Court has granted cert on a case saying, please tell us if we should overrule Humphrey's executor. Boom, right out there. They're presenting the question without trimming it at all. And in that case, this just fits in with the Trump agenda to gain real executive branch control over the executive branch. So they're threatening this, and that ought to terrify Democrats if he follows through on that. Here's another thing, and here I can actually break a little news. I did get to spend a little bit of time with a small group this morning with two of Lucretia's favorite Republicans, Tim Massey and Rand Paul. And I have to say, I thought they were really good and really impressive. They didn't beat up on Trump. They just said, look, we're free traders. We're also budget hawks, and we're kind of disappointed that things are going the opposite way. Okay, fine. But on this budget question, they pointed out some really interesting things. First of all, we're about to do our third continuing resolution in a year because we can't seem to ever do budgeting anymore. The first one was passed in Biden's lame duck period, and then Trump passed another one, which is just continue where we were going. So we're now voting again on what is essentially the last Biden budget, all these, 9 months into the Trump administration. So one of the points they made is a curious one. They said, DOJ did all this great work to cancel foreign aid and, all these other things. But that old continuing resolution restores those funds. If we're saying we're going to just continue the Biden spending plan from a year ago. And he says, no, I don't know if they'll be able to spend them or not if we've gotten rid of the people and the organizations, but who knows? And so they're pointing out that even the continuing resolution is in some ways a small victory for Democrats. Now, they really want to restore all that healthcare funding, and I think they're leaning on that because the polls show that's one issue that Americans are still upset about is healthcare. And I thought Obama fixed that forever, but apparently not. And a lot of that spending was simply a proxy way to expand the welfare state. So what I think Trump should do next week, if we get into lockdown, is every day he and his fabulous press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, they ought to come out every day and say, okay, here's what they want, and just give some particular outrageous piece of spending from the existing regime. They want to continue with this. And then every day, I think the Republican position should be, okay, we won't pass that continuing resolution. Today's resolution has this, and it's the current level minus something the Democrats want. And every day you up the ante of how much less they're going to get the longer they hold out. Trump would be a genius at that. You just do your golden fleece spending awards like that every single day. And I think that after a week or 10 days or longer, the Democrats will fold. Finally, my hunch is, Schumer is a coward. He's a very smart guy. He made his caucus in the Senate go along with a continuing resolution back in the winter. And boy, did he catch flack for that from the party base and a lot of his own members. On the far left, like Lizzie Warren. And I think this time, I don't think he really wants to do this either, but he feels like he has to. And so I think, he's going to end up folding. But it's just a matter of how long and how much pain the Trump people, if they're determined, which I think they are, will exact out of him. So I'm sitting back with extra popcorn to go along with my Kamala Harris book tour popcorn, and I'm going to enjoy the show.
Lucretia, what do you think about this other story that OMB under Russ Vought is trying to escalate beyond just the shutdown? I believe he has said that if there is a government shutdown, we will just use it as an opportunity to fire more people and to shut down more programs because Congress no longer is paying for them. And then if they want to recreate these programs, they're going to have to pass a new law. What do you think of that, Lucretia?
I think it's wonderful. I think it's a game changer, as I told you guys. So the OMB memo from Russ says, I need you to identify all of the non-essential employees who are engaged in activities that are not consistent, not aligned with the Trump administration priorities. And those people will be furloughed, and then they won't be hired back. And so who are those people? They are members of the Federal Employees Union, which is what, 99.99997 Democrat. So they're all Democrats losing their jobs. The really interesting thing is that Trump has already set the stage so that, unlike, say, the shutdown in the Obama years, where, remember, open air parks were where nobody actually ever patrolled them, no federal park rangers or anything patrolled them to begin with. They shut them down so that they could maximize the pain felt by average Americans. Trump has done the opposite. So no, even the raise in military pay will go through. ICE will get its money, on and on and on. None of the priorities of the Trump administration that are on behalf of the American people, generally speaking, none of those will actually see any cuts to funding. Part of that's because of the passage of the big, beautiful bill. Part of it's some other things. But anyway, so if they decide to shut down the government, all of those people that have been identified by the heads of all the federal agencies will lose their jobs. They won't be able to come back. And I will be dancing the biggest happy dance in the world when that happens. I'm just going to tell you. It'll be so
can I add
great.
one-
Go ahead.
Can I add
Unlike
one
unlike
footnote?
unlike you two, I actually was the subject of one of these. Oh, but go ahead, Steve.
Well, okay. I was just going to say this. We always hear government shutdown, and the mainstream media goes nuts. And I always like to ask people the day one of these things started, or 2 days after it starts, the police still patrolling your streets? Are your local schools still open? Is the planning department in your city open to process your building permit or give you your business license? Is the state tax collector still getting your state income taxes collected from you? The point is that we have, I think, something like 50,000 governing units in the country. If you go all the way down to the local mosquito abatement unit in Marin County, right? Mosquito abatement district. And all those governments stay open. It's just one government that shuts down, and not even, as Lucretia points out, the whole of it. Just some parts of it. The really essential parts, like, the military, social security checks, they keep going along.
Air traffic
So
control.
to say that we're shutting down government is completely wrong. And again, it misinstructs people about who actually governs us and where. And most of the really important parts of government, like, our local police, they go on completely unchanged and unaffected by this. So this is, again, sort of Washington, New York media fascination that most Americans sort of look up and say, oh, okay, government in Washington shut down. Doesn't bother me much.
Question
Bothered
for
you,
you,
John,
John.
right? Sorry. Okay.
Well, just my perspective on it was I was there for the '96 shutdown. I guess probably the first one between Robert Dole's Congress and the Dole Gingrich Congress
That was not the
and
first one. They
President
actually started
Clinton.
in the 70s, but never mind. That they really ramped up in the 80s and 90s. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
And so eventually Gingrich caved, and it was only because the polls started to turn against the Republicans
Yeah.
and in Bill Clinton's favor. And the only thing I would say that's different isn't it than the Clinton ones or the Obama ones, both of whose poll numbers apparently went up after the shutdowns, is that this time Trump's president. And Trump's not in favor of government spending. So I don't know whether the past really is a good predictor because usually it's Republicans in Congress trying to shut down the government to save money. Democratic presidents want to spend it, so they would oppose it. And now it's the reverse. So I don't know what that means in terms of what the public polls would show, but I think that's the polling is what's going to determine how long it goes on for and who caves first. That was my experience from watching it up close. Although I got to be declared an essential employee, so I still got to work anyway. And I was also in the Senate at the time, working in the Senate, so we weren't going to shut ourselves down, of course. But we have
question before you go on, John,
ahead,
please.
Linda.
Jeffries and Schumer are, calling the Voight guy all sorts of nasty names, that he's a malignant political hack, excuse me, on and on. And Schumer says it doesn't matter. Trump can make these threats, but the courts are going to overturn him. My understanding, but you're my lawyer, John, personal and otherwise, that if these rifts come as a result of the government shutdown, there is no legal mechanism for a RIFT employee to appeal to get their job back. Am I wrong about that?
Well, so it depends how each statute's written for each agency. And so if,
So it's
some of
agency by
the,
agency?
yeah, it's agency by agency, but I could see some agency statutes, if the money runs out and then Congress doesn't reappropriate it or they don't reauthorize the employee, I could see it terminating and I could see other ones not. It really does depend on how each agency's written. But one thing that I think the OMB guys have in their favor, this is related to this question of the pocket rescissions, where basically now that if the government shuts down, vote's going to say, well, we're not going to spend any more appropriated money for the rest of the year because we were going to do that. Remember, he wanted to cut the appropriate spending anyway. I think that's going to work now. I think the government shutdown almost guarantees that the administration is going to succeed in cutting current spending down to the levels they wanted. So the Democrats are almost playing right into Trump's hands, I think, on this. And then as Steve's point is, I think true, is when people notice that they still get their Social Security checks and Medicare, Medicaid, and that all these other things the government does that doesn't really perform any real public service, the life will go on. The polls might swing in Trump's favor.
They
Okay,
won't
we
shut
have
down the parks.
yeah. Well, so in our last segment, we're going to return to this format about talking. We have about 15 minutes about talking about an article. So we thought we would talk about Steve's interesting article about, believe it or not, comparing Max Weber to Charlie Kirk. Steve, why don't you, Lucretia, will you wake up, please? I'm sorry. You gotta stop taking all that Tylenol. Wake up. So, Steve, will you describe the thesis of your article, and then Lucretia will be the first critic, and then I'll go second. Steve, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well,
In
it's
2 minutes or less.
right. I'm not really comparing them. I mean, the title is misleading that way. From Max Weber to Charlie Kirk is the main title. And this is very hard to do because, and Lucretia thinks I'm nuts as usual. I have long been fascinated with that famous lecture of Weber's from 1919, Politics as a Vocation. It's 28,000 words long. It took 3 hours to deliver. The students were very disappointed with it, which is a relevant point. And the first 2/3 are really boring. It's Weber's attempt to try, without acknowledging it, to overcome the challenges to democracy from Karl Marx on the left and Nietzsche on the right. He doesn't say that's what he's doing, but if you actually know the whole story of Weber, that's what's going on. In the meantime, you have all these radicalized students coming out of World War I, and it's chaos in Germany. People keep saying, and I've been playing with another famous line from 40 years ago now. It's Alan Bloom's famous line in The Closing of the American Mind, where it says, America today is a Disneyland version of the Weimar Republic. Well, you got to strike the Disneyland part of it now, because we're actually having real violence coming from the left. And in Germany, it was different leftist factions clashing with one another, and that's a separate story for another day. But lots of assassinations, lots of mass violence in the street, and you had very unstable students and young people who, and I'm not talking about Charlie. See, Kirk is the one guy who I think resembled the maturing of political judgment that Weber's trying to point at the end of that complicated lecture. And I don't have time to sort of unwind all that. I may give a longer version of that article as a lecture and seminar sometime soon down at Pepperdine. In any case, I think what Weber was describing of the instability and the irresponsibility of young people working from their passions describes what's happened to, well, for example, the person who shot Kirk. Anyway, Weber was trying to head them off. He failed at it. Weber, by the way, died a few months later of the Spanish influenza. It's an interesting little coincidence. And several of the students who he had in mind, in my article, I identified 2 particular students of his that he had in mind, one of whom later committed suicide because he just couldn't cope with the world. And the other one, having been, is that famous Hungarian theorist, George Lukács, who became one of those sort of Frankfurt Marxists and wrote an inspiration for Gramsci and all those guys. He'd been a critic of communism and then suddenly turned on a dime and became a Leninist. And the point is that I think we see, we're not quite Weimar Republic. We're not quite in a revolutionary situation, but things are bad. And what I noticed when I was looking at all these clips of Charlie Kirk maturing from this 18-year-old I thought was kind of brash and a flash in the pan to how fast the guy matured and how sophisticated and subtle he was in his campus appearances, and what a genius he was in building this huge organization. Who knows where he was going to go in life, right? And his religious faith was central to it. By the way, Weber, I always assumed he was an atheist. I think maybe that's not right. But he was always very respectful of religious people involved in politics. He was an admirer of Martin Luther. So anyway, it's a complicated story, and I tried in the space of 2,000 words to just pass a little of that along as a cautionary table. Again, really intended more for young people, but also saying the adults in the room. I have a whole paragraph about how irresponsible Democrats have been with their language. Chris Murphy saying, we're in a revolutionary situation and, we've got to stop Trump by any means necessary. Well, that language has always meant sanctioning violence, and that has to stop. And I'll stop.
Okay.
Lucretia's not convinced based on the many different kinds of faces she made while you were talking. Lucretia, why did this essay fail?
It's not so much that I don't know that the essay failed. It began with such weak material that I think it was probably a resounding success. As I told Steve when I read it before he'd even told us it was out there, I happened to come across it. I said, I enjoyed reading your piece, but the one thing that stood out to me is how little Weber has to teach us. I got nothing of Steve's own, admonishments to the left, to the Schumers and so forth of the world. I got nothing of that from Weber. Seriously, I mean, the guys, you can't. You can't bring prudence into a discussion when you don't have the philosophical foundations from which prudence would emanate, is how I would put it. And maybe Steve kind of hinted at that he was trying to get at that a little bit, but I'm not sure why anybody has to read Weber to figure that one out. I do think that the pull between Nietzsche's nihilism and Marx's ultimately nihilism too, but from an entirely different way. I mean, the nothingness that we try to put a substitute in for give some meaning to life. That's, I think, a very interesting question. And I honestly, Steve, I would have been interested to see you, if you had another 5,000 words, play that one out a little bit farther. No, I didn't. I don't mean it like that. I get it. He had a subject and he did what he could with the subject. But the really interesting question again is, what is it about the emptiness of our young people's souls that gets filled? God, filling them with Marx or Nietzsche is actually much preferable in these days to filling them with furry, pedophilic anime online. But it's all a little bit of a piece of the same thing, right? So I did, from that point of view, I thought it was a very interesting article. I meant it when I said I enjoyed reading it. But Weber to me seems just, I know you're going to tell me that all of our teachers thought he was so important, but I don't think so. I don't think he has that much to teach us.
Well, no, I agree with that criticism. And I did it very quickly. I have a sentence in there that conveyed some of that criticism, saying one of the problems with ethics, with Weber's famous ethics of responsibility and ethic of ultimate ends, is that he completely punts on the question of prudence. He can't recover it at all. And it goes with his abandonment of the foundations of American democracy, or all democracy, and natural rights, social contract theory. He thought that Nietzsche and Marx had been so successful that you had to find a new ground for it. And he's wrong about that. And look, I mean, I think
and Charlie Kirk proved him that.
Yeah, sadly, yes. Right. There's a meme.
I don't know, sadly, but go ahead.
Well, first of all, I kind of find Weber interesting, even though he's boring much of the time, except the last third of that lecture, I just think is gripping reading, especially when you learn more about the background. And by the way, the person who turned me on to reading Weber more closely, John, was your Harvard instructor, Daniel Bell. He wrote a classic article. Classic article. It's sort of obscure, but a few of us know it and cherish
Yeah,
it.
this
40 years
article
ago.
you were talking about of his, I'd never heard of. He never mentioned it in class,
No,
but
well,
he
it was.
was a socialist.
Oh, that's right. No, it's that's one of the famous places where Bell said, "I'm a socialist in economics, but a conservative in culture." Bell didn't have the answer either.
Yes.
But the point is, I think Weber is more interesting and more useful. And by the way, you can use Weber to go on and make our points, Lucretia. That's part of why I like to bring him up, because everything gets worse from there. I mean, if you told me that I'm stuck in a room and I either got to work from Weber or work from John Dewey, I'll take Weber every time. Dewey is much worse.
Fortunately, those are not our choices, Steve.
Oh, I understand that. And then, by the way, I don't know if you caught my little throwaway line along the way saying that Weber's sort of rival, not a rival figure in competition, but his sort of closest analog was Woodrow Wilson, which I think is correct. Wilson didn't write at the great turgid length of Weber, but he came close to it in a couple of ways. So anyway, I mean, I think the fact that Weber was alert to the problems. One of the things he said, Weber said, is that I hate communism because these are horrible people. They're violent. They do horrible things, and they will discredit socialism for 100 years. And that's kind of what happened with the Soviet Union, right? I mean, socialism is back now. And that's because, as Jaffa warned us in 1991, when everyone said it's all over for the left, he said, no, it's not. They're about to get much worse. And socialism will be liberated from its toxic association with the Soviet Union. And boy, is he
because it's never been tried anywhere yet, Steve.
Well, there's that, right? Real? Yes. Okay.
So my 2 cents on this.
Go ahead.
My 2 cents on the essay before we close is I enjoy reading about Max Weber because it helps you understand progressivism. Yes. Right. Woodrow Wilson's just a rhetorician compared to Weber, who I think really had the real ideas. I wasn't sure what it had to do with Charlie Kirk. That's the part of the essay I didn't really understand. But I really loved talking about Weber. And to defend my old teacher, Daniel Bell, he was interested in the same questions as Weber, and I thought had a more satisfying answer. So one of the great books that Bell wrote was about whether capitalism, and I think it actually kind of answers Lucretia's question about what's happening to our youth, because remember Max Weber's maybe the one work that people most know him for is Protestant capitalism, the idea that the Protestant work ethic produced capitalism, which doesn't really seem to explain why Asia has been doing so well. But right, I mean, it just doesn't. Yeah. But Bell was interested whether capitalism could keep going once it produced so much luxury and surplus. And maybe that's part of the answer to Lucretia's question. Why do we have so many young people who are like Charlie Kirk's assassin, or maybe now the guy who shot at the Dallas ICE officers, these young men who become fascinated with these, bizarre ideologies from surfing the internet and lead very anti-social lives? Maybe it's because they lead such lives of luxury compared to any other time in human history, the kind of luxuries we have. And, that was Bell's thought, that the name of his book is The Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism, that capitalism would produce such wealth that it would undermine the work ethic that's necessary for capitalism to succeed.
But he really got that from Schumpeter, who wrote that first back in the 30s. But here's if I was doing the 5,000 or 7,000 word version, I might move on to this question. So I just mentioned a moment ago that Bell was famous for saying, I'm a socialist in economics, but I'm a conservative in culture. The question now that relates to this whole period right now with Charlie Kirk and all the rest of it is, why is it that the socialist left is also culturally so far left with things like the LGBTQ and all the rest of this stuff, right? Bell, of course, is dead now, but he would have resisted all this, I'm quite sure. But why is it that the left has not followed Bell? There's almost nobody on the left that I can think of whose a Bell's self-description applies to, which tells me there's something wrong with socialism, with this, the romantic sensibility that we can achieve utopia through, socialist revolution. It always comes with the other leftist nihilist stuff and all the rest of that. Lucretia, you look like you're ready to jump. And
no, I'm not going to jump. I'm just going to say you guys are making this too, sorry, I don't mean this to be insulting. I don't. Pretentiously intellectual. And I don't mean you're being pretentious.
Pretentious is an insult.
No, I don't.
You say it about Steve.
But here's what I mean by that. It's really very simple. I keep going back to it. There's basically two positions in the world today, and one of those looks at human nature and discovers that human nature, God, the laws of nature, it doesn't have to be religious in focus, but at some point, I guess it probably does. Anyway, because you have to believe at least in a creator, that we are created. We don't create ourselves. We don't evolve into whatever we choose to, nor does history evolve with us. That that position is different from the entire position of the left: socialism, nihilism, atheism, Antifa. Anything you look at, they want to be God. You've got two choices: either you recognize there is a God, and that recognizing that there's a God, a creator, nature's, whatever you want to call it, actually tells us how we ought to live if we but consult it. Or I don't have to consult anything and I can just will exactly the way I want to live. I can be my own God. And that's what explains all of those contradictions, in my view, that Steve was rightly talking about. You too, John. It's not capitalism that destroys men's souls. It's the rejection of God. It's the rejection of anything greater than yourself. Because if you reject the idea that there's something greater than yourself, then you do become a god. And of course, ultimately, you unless you have a genuine Nietzsche will to power, you face the abyss, and the abyss gets you. That's my view
I
of the
think that
world.
you're narrowing the grounds on which you can believe in good government if you associate it that you have to be Christian
You
or
don't. I didn't say
religious.
Oh, wait.
Christian.
But you're
I never
saying the
said
natural
Christian.
rights have to have some source and a belief in God. I don't see why
Nature.
atheists can't organize a well-run society on very similar principles to the ones that you support. I don't see
John,
why.
when did you sign on to the Tim Kaine campaign?
But no,
No, I'm just
I
saying.
didn't
I'm not
say
saying that's my view, but
Christianity, nor I said just God.
or
Nature, if consult nature in the way Aristotle did, learn, study the ways of human beings. I of course believe that there is a God who created the world, and that he's accessible to some extent through human reason, but also by faith. But you don't have to believe in that God to believe in the natural rights theory of the Declaration of Independence. That's why it says the laws of nature and nature's God.
Well,
It's the most brilliant thing produced by man in terms of setting up a government in the history of humankind.
so
The
John,
laws of nature and nature's God. Sorry, Steve.
I am gonna grind up little fragments from Thomas Aquinas and drop it in your tea for the next couple of months and see if it does any
I
good.
am sure it will taste terrible. But why
Better
don't
than a Korean
we?
hot dog.
Oh no, there you're
Korean corn
wrong.
dog.
There you are
Corn dog, yeah,
wrong.
sorry.
The great thing
It
about Korean
tastes
corn
better than it
dogs is they
looks. It
come in
would
so
have
many
to.
flavors. So, we speaking of Korean things, we didn't get to talk about K-pop Demon Hunters, which I watched under duress from Steve Hayward, and we
Yeah.
didn't get a chance to discuss it. We'll talk about it next week maybe. But we're at the come to the end of the show. So, Lucretia, Babylon Bee
Oh
headlines.
man.
Oh
So
no.
good. More winning. We didn't talk about the UN speech either, but we ran out of time. More winning. Trump to demolish UN building and replace with UFC arena.
Well, I'm for that.
Hillary says we must all stop pointing fingers, as we all know the Republicans are to blame. We also didn't discuss Jimmy Kimmel because Steve was bored with it. But anyway, Americans return to not watching Jimmy Kimmel by choice. Sorry. Donald Trump. This one's for you, John, because we didn't discuss your article either, which was very interesting. John wrote a great piece about the Trump administration's use of the military to destroy drug cartel drug
Although
runners.
Steve just accused
Hey,
me of being the worst article I've ever written.
I don't know about the worst. No, kidding. And nor did we discuss the Pete Hegseth. I just want you guys to know
Oh
that,
yeah,
that we
that's
talked.
interesting.
We had all these great plans for what we were going to discuss. Pete Hegseth has summoned to Quantico all of the senior commanders in the army, all the admirals and generals that are commanders, and the internet is abuzz about it all. I just want you guys to know that they were on the army base next to me. They were going to have a big ceremony so this is serious, honoring me on Tuesday, and it had to be postponed because the general
Because
wants
of
to be
this.
there, but he has to go see Pete, who I believe is going to tell these generals, either you get in line, you yes sir, you give your objections to any lawful orders, absolutely give your objections, but when those objections are disregarded, you get in line and you say yes sir, and you move out and draw fire. And if you're not willing to do that, turn in your resignation right now. That's what I think is going to happen. We'll see.
Well,
what do you think, John?
Well, the left. Well, I'll go.
Steve.
The left is all spun up that it's a coup, and it's just the left being paranoid. I'll just say this: I did speak earlier in the week before this announcement was made with a pretty well-placed person in town who I think is very sound, who said there's a big internal fight going on inside different parts of the Trump administration over the next defense strategy review, which they do every couple of years, and it may or may not have something to do with that. I don't know. They might be wanting to get ahead of it, but we'll see.
Those things are bureaucratic, so bureaucratic.
See, I figured what was going to happen was he was going to fire some people, but then I heard Lucretia wasn't coming, so I was like, well, he wasn't going to bring the sword of Damocles with him to fire them all with. So since Lucretia's not going to be there, it is just going to be namby-pamby talking and no serious firing.
All right,
So
give us one
I
more,
guess
Lucretia.
I'll do the exit line, which is always drink your whiskey neat, buy more books. And Steve, what's your latest AI excursion?
This week it's William Faulkner on the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour. It's a little long, but not too bad. In the dim lit, smoke thick air of some forgotten bar on the edge of town, the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour hums along like an old worn clock that tells no time but the moment. A moment stretched long, slow, and filled with the murmur of voices. They, those men and women, voices like whiskey itself, rich and deep, drawled and twisted through tales and truths, real and imagined, beneath the laughter that comes not from joy, but from some deeper hunger, a need for the sound to fill the space left by silence. And they drink, those 3, whiskey to silence the ghosts, to drown the present in the roar of the past. And every hour is happy, for every hour is the same hour, as it always was and always will be. Parts of it I think are pretty good. Parts of it are just ridiculous.
Not bad.
I've always
thought okay, I
get
sorry. 4D chess. Trump says chugging Windex may be harmful, causing millions of Democrats to chug Windex.
Well, there have been memes of this for years, right? Yeah.
All right, everybody. Right. We hope our 2 watchers enjoyed our first video of the 3 Whiskey Happy Hour. Hopefully, 2 million miler Steve will figure out how to fix that while he's sitting on the plane for another 1,000,000 miles. And we'll see everybody next week.
I know.
Bye,
everybody.